Integrator 2018.1 product update. I'm Bianca and I'll be your moderator today. Presenting today from Wolters Kluwer are Briony Campbell, Director of Product for CCH Integrator, and Jim Edwards, Global Director for CCH Integrator. In today's webinar, Briony and Jim will be taking you through the main enhancements following the recent upgrade. You can submit questions via the Questions tab at any time throughout the webinar. I think we're ready to begin, so I'll hand you over to Briony and Jim.
Thanks very much, Bianca, and welcome everyone to today's webinar update on the 2018.1 release of CCH Integrator. Thanks for your time, and today we've got a fairly packed agenda covering off on all of the highlights of the release. So we're going to step you through each of the major functional advancements in the technology, and then also look forward to what's coming later in 2018, and also looking at some of the activity that's going on within our innovation labs. Just to set a bit of context behind this release, we are continuing to increase the overall investment into the integrated platform to take advantage of some of the new technology sets that are advancing quite rapidly, that are relevant in the context of a corporate tax function, and also in the context of an outsourced shared service or outsourced advisory business, or outsourced compliance practice rather. With that, we have a fairly aggressive roadmap of enhancements, and we are now doing, as we said in the last webinar, quarterly releases of Integrator to continually provide smaller releases with a higher frequency of update to you. So that cadence is going to continue, and at the second half of this session, you'll see also about a lot of the exciting innovations that we're looking at, picking up some great new automation technologies that will help streamline your processes even further, both in the context of the direct taxes, where most of you are already using the technology, but also beyond into managing other tax types around the world. So with that as a bit of a backdrop, I'll hand over to Briony to step us through the session today.
Great, thanks, Jim. So as Jim said, there are quite a few areas that we've concentrated on for 2018.1 this year for our Q1 release, essentially. They are workflow, and they're the boxes that are highlighted in red there. So workflow, Websheets is another area, reports, security, and tax accounting. And certainly it's tax accounting that we're concentrating on as a big priority overall for this year. But definitely in this release, there's some great functionality coming through for tax accounting as well. So I guess the biggest change to the Integrator product in the space of tax accounting for 2018.1 is a new work paper within the application. And the new work paper relates to an equity allocation work paper to be able to support the classification and disclosure of non-P&L movements on both the balance sheet as well as the asset schedule. So certainly over time, quite a number of our users have provided us feedback in terms of what's required from a disclosure perspective for auditors, certainly, or also internal stakeholders with regard to equity movements. And definitely over time, the feedback has been that there needs to be a lot more transparency within the application. So we took that on board and we started looking at that at the back of last year. And what we've done is we've brought through a work paper that supports those adjustments. Essentially, there's 10 buckets or 10 types of equity adjustments that can be catered for within the work paper. And those buckets can be configured or to meet the purposes of each business. So we, on average, users were telling us on average they'd have no more than, say, 6 adjustments. We've provided 10 categories just in case there are those outliers that require further transparency around those. So prior to this change within the application, there was just one bucket for equity allocation, and it wasn't split out between things like available to sale or asset revaluations or anything like that. So now you'll be able to see that far more transparently within the application.
Yeah, and just on that enhancement too, we've designed and implemented that enhancement in partnership with a number of large multinational corporations that have got this requirement from their auditors and equally from their disclosures as well.
Yeah, that's great. Now within that enhancement, those 10 buckets. At the moment, the names of the buckets are Equity 1 through Equity 10. Now, currently, you can rename those buckets to be available for sale or asset revaluation or whatever the case may be within your business via what we call a language translation pack, which essentially allows you to rename the certain columns within Integrator. Now, ultimately, within the application, we will be providing users with the ability to self-configure those from the front end, but for the moment, you can change those via a language pack. In addition to the equity allocation work paper, in the 2018.1 release, we've also included the valuation allowance, reserve and adjustment schedules within aggregated workbooks. So prior to this release, those schedules were not actually available on the aggregated workbook. We've now completed all of those schedules, and now all schedules are present on the aggregated workbook. So that's a great development from the point of view that people are using aggregated workbooks for the purposes of reporting. So that's a really good one that's come through. One of the things that we have had feedback for over time from a number of users, particularly those users that have previously used Tax Integrator, is the availability of what is essentially the SOTI adjustment in web-based work papers. So we have made an enhancement to bring through for single gap purposes the adjustment for the SOTI adjustment within the actual work paper itself. So no longer will clients have to actually close out of the work paper to see what the impact is on the actual overall SOTI movement. You'll actually be able to see that impact within the work paper itself. So I think a lot of users will find that really beneficial. I'm pleased to say another enhancement that we've delivered in the 2018.1 release is the aggregated versions of the DTA and DTL reports as standard reports within the product. So we do have a UDR data source for aggregate numbers for deferred tax assets and deferred tax liabilities, but now we have a standard report within the application to bring through those. Now, one thing to call out there is that they are separate reports. They're not on the one report itself. So there's a separate one for deferred tax asset. There's a separate one for deferred tax liability. And in addition to that, for this report, aggregated report, it actually is different to our other aggregated reports in the application in the fact that the numbers actually flow down the page. They don't go across the page. So you'll get, on the first page, you'll get the aggregated numbers, and then subsequent underneath down the page, you'll get the respective workbook numbers that make up those aggregated numbers.
So it makes it much easier to review and print off as well.
Much easier.
Yep.
Yeah. Right, so that's it from a tax accounting perspective.
Okay. Now, in terms of Websheets, we've made a number of enhancements to the Websheets framework. Now, conscious that not everyone on this phone line or webinar might be using the Websheets technology, but just to set the context before we go into the detail, Websheets is essentially the next generation of the Integrator data collection, calculation, and compliance engine. So it's a much more flexible engine which can allow the creation and use of essentially an infinite number of workbooks, so schedules and work papers, to support any form of calculation or data collection requirement for tax compliance and reporting. With that, the Websheets has been used as an enabler to then support lots of different tax compliance outputs for many corporations already, and equally for many large service firms all around the world. In fact, we've got some customers that are producing tax returns in more than 30 countries already on this Websheets technology. So it's been picked up and used around the world very quickly. So yeah, with that in mind, we've made a number of enhancements to Websheets, and a lot of it's just around trying to improve the efficiency and use of the technology, particularly in relation to working with document attachments and file attachments. There were some enhancements made in this area late last year to support the submission of attachments to the Australian Tax Office for the Australian local file reporting. Those enhancements have now been further advanced to integrate with some of the existing document attachment capability. So we've now got a a unified document browser that's available across all web sheets to allow you to easily look at all attachments that have been attached in this workbook, but also any other related workbooks for the current entity that you're working on. In addition to that, we've improved the way in which data is brought into the product. So with Websheets, it's got the ability to effectively dynamically create accounts. So you can pull in a list of transactions from your source system, map them through to an account on a web sheet, and automatically create them as sub-accounts, which can then have their own calculations or further data flows off them. Now, we've improved the ability to change those mapping rules so that as you're reclassifying or altering the destination where these transactions are mapped to, it can automatically remove existing transactions that have been created on the web sheets or rows and then move them into the new location. So just, again, another little automation improvement to make it more efficient when you move forward into new reporting periods. In addition to that too, our ability to export across to the CCH Integrator Lodgement Portal, which is used for electronic filing in Australia, that's also been enhanced in relation to the way in which it works with document attachments. Another enhancement we've made is around the area of workflow. So again, some of you may be aware of the workflow module, some of you won't. So for those who haven't, I'll just to give you a bit of an overview about what the workflow module in the Integrator is. Now, it's been around for a number of years, and we've been making further advancements around the workflow module. The purpose of the workflow module is to provide an integrated ability for you to track the execution of certain tasks to achieve a particular compliance deliverable. So it might be preparation of a tax return or preparation of a tax provision or making of a tax payment. Whatever the milestone is that needs to be tracked, you can then go away and actually configure your own series of tasks to ensure that that task is or that deliverable is completed. You can assign responsibilities for those tasks to individuals or multiple individuals, and you can set up reminders and alerts as well to prompt people before those tasks are then due. So it just provides an extra governance framework over particular outputs, if you like, or obligations of the tax function, so that you're not having to monitor this stuff yourself. You can have the system then go and help you in that monitoring process. So it's been around, as I said, for a number of years. We've had a number of clients pick it up and use it, but what we've done in this release is we've actually changed the module now so that it's actually available to all corporate users of Integrator. So whoever's currently using the Integrator technology gets access to this workflow module, and there's no additional cost for it. So you just get access to the functionality. But what I'd encourage all of you to do is have a think about those processes that are currently being managed outside of Integrator and consider what could potentially be managed through this workflow process. So, you know, like a lot of workflow tools, it's essentially just a to-do list with task allocations. But by using the one integrated piece of technology means that you can have much stronger control over all of the processes. So better to be using the one platform rather than having people do perhaps provisioning or return preparation in Integrator and then doing task management out in Excel or on some SharePoint site. So, and then below you can just see a few examples of where that could be used. Now we've just got a very short video. We're just going to quickly play it. It just runs for about 90 seconds or so. But while it's playing, I'll just talk to you about the workflow module and how it operates. You can see there it's presented in the context of a workbook. Of course, a workbook could be created for one legal entity, or it could be created for a whole group. It could be created one workbook to manage the full tax compliance obligations for the whole year if you wanted to. So there's no restriction as to what a workbook relates to. But you could see on that previous screen there, we had the list of tasks that were enabled to support the delivery of some tax effect accounting outputs. You can see there that we've got email reminder notifications set against particular tasks, and that we've got planned commencement and completion dates. And you can also then just simply go and update the status. So what it encourages you to do is extend the application out to whoever's involved in the compliance process to actually record the status and the completion of those tasks. And you can see there, email remindering, so it sends an email automatically out to whoever's involved in that process. And you can configure what emails are sent and when, so that they don't become too much of an annoyance or just be simply ignored by people. The other thing you do there, at the moment, that blue icon, is the workflow is integrated with the status of the workbooks. So as a certain task is completed, it can automatically lock the workbook. indicating effectively electronic sign-off or completion of the task, and then locking down the workbook so that no one can make further change. Number of other changes. Briony, I'll hand back to you.
Great, thanks, Jim. So another thing that we've done in this release is have a look at some security items as well. So we're always enhancing security. It's obviously a very important aspect of the product for clients, and not only from a security perspective, but also from a usability perspective. So one of the exciting things that we've done is we've actually rationalised the functional access items down from 470 items down to 250, making it a lot easier for admin users within the application to maintain users or onboard users as well. So previously it was quite a lengthy task to set up roles and responsibilities within the application. Now it's going to be a lot easier. It very much follows the flow of our platform overview, which is your core, your design and your solutions layer. And the one thing to point out here is the fact that essentially on upgrade, users will inherit the most appropriate access item based on the changes that we've made. So there should be no impact to client environments by this change.
Yep. And the other purpose for the rationalisation too was just to remove a lot of redundancy. So there were, there was very, very, very granular access where people weren't actually using that granularity. So that was part of the motivation for rationalising. So yeah, we're confident that through the upgrade process, there won't be any consequence or a need for you to go and actually review your functional access, either for roles or individual.
Yeah, definitely.
Individual users.
Definitely. And if you are at all interested and you did want to check, I guess, what were the functional access items prior to the release, what are the functional access items now that are most appropriate for that, then we do have a document available that will be made available on CCH Integrator Help that you can reference and get comfort over that. But as we said, there should be no impact. We've also added a new file extension whitelist to system options within the integrator. So this is to protect against users importing or loading potentially harmful files within the application. So we've defaulted what we believe are the files that you would want to upload into Integrator. But what admin users can do is be able to add files that they don't necessarily want to have uploaded into the application, just to make sure from a security perspective that there's no harmful upload of files that shouldn't be uploaded. So that's a really important one for end users. General enhancements. So certainly over time, we're always looking to enhance performance as a whole within the application. And we've certainly taken time throughout 2018.1 to really fine-tune the performance in regards to Websheet performance, Websheet responsiveness within the application. We do know that when users are creating Websheets, that there's certain things that can impact performance within the application. So it's usually, the complexity around formulas, the number of columns that are created, the number of rows that are created, all do or can impact performance, if they're outside normal kind of limits. So what we would expect. So we have spent time fine-tuning performance. That said, it's not a set and forget for us. We will be spending more and more time on Websheet performance improvements to make sure that, the editability of cells, the saving of a Websheet, all of that is actually taken into account and as optimal as possible within the application.
Yeah. And with the increased need to bring in transactional data into the compliance engine, either for automated calculation purposes or to support disclosure, that's really what's driving the importance of us investing into Websheets and improving performance. So, yeah, we've got a number of corporations already implementing Integrator into countries where there is a requirement to disclose detailed transactional information. So through those experiences of them implementing, we're starting to see, just how much data is having to be brought in, and we're talking tens of thousands of rows. So it's very large compared to the old, traditional tax accounting approach, which was more trial balance led, whereas now it's leaning more towards pulling in transactions.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so roadmap priorities for 2018.
Yeah. So what we want to do here is just talk through a few of the key themes that are underpinning our focus. So if we talk about, what's driving, Briony and I, we're responsible for the product. We're the ones who take on board all the feedback and go out there and survey all of our customers, get that feedback, and then work directly with our designers and application architects and developers to develop the software. And try and work in close consultation with all of you in that process. So we just want to explain to you what's sort of guiding our thinking and our prioritisation at the moment. And as we said, please engage directly with us, either through questions on this forum or offline, if you want to have a further detailed conversation about a direction and where we're heading. Any ideas that you've got, we'd love to hear them. But broadly, there's three key themes which I'll just list out here that kind of driving our focus at the moment, and this is really for this year. So with tax accounting, a lot of our prime driver, and this is a significant portion of our investment right now, is around improving the automation and efficiency of those core tax accounting processes. Obviously tax accounting is our core, and it has been at our core since about 2004. There are still lots more opportunities to improve the automation of those processes. Whether that be automation of certain work papers to then support particular adjustments, but anything that means less time involved during that critical provision or close window. We know that you're all under huge time pressure to close the books, calculate tax, and book tax expense in the general ledger. So there's lots of things that we can be doing to minimise the amount of human interaction and touch points required in that process. So we want to try and get as close to 100% automation as possible. Where you're only really looking at reviewing outputs rather than actually inputting and preparing. Now, obviously, everyone's slightly different, and a lot of people don't have quality source data to enable 100% automation, but that's our goal. So, a lot of focus around that. Usability. So, look, it's fair to say we haven't really invested a lot over the last few years around usability of the application, and there's lots of things that we look at in the application that there's lots of opportunities for improvement. Over the years, as we've evolved the application to do a lot more and be relevant to lots and lots of different tax systems in different countries, we've had to introduce lots of functionality. And in doing so, we haven't invested enough on usability. So we're putting a big importance on that this year. The first phase of that usability improvement was what Briony just ran through before, was the rationalisation of functional access. The next release, and this is in June of this year, includes a complete refresh of the whole user interface. So it's new imagery coming through. So at the moment, there's 135 icons that are being used in Integrator. A lot of those icons are a bit inconsistent, a bit confusing, and for someone who's just an infrequent user of the application, it can be a bit overwhelming. So what we're trying to do is get to a point where the application is so intuitive that it doesn't require anyone to ever read a manual or go through training. So that's the ambition, is to try and work towards that goal. So that means, a lot of simplification of text on screens. That left-hand menu that we've got there, which drives access to different functions in the system, we're going to rationalise that completely and, get that out of the way. It doesn't need to be there on screen all the time. So there's a whole bunch of things that we're doing at the moment, in early stages of development that are pretty exciting. Don't worry about major impact on retraining your user base. Wherever they're based around the world, we're going to be doing these as small step changes because we don't want to have to impose on you that you have to go through a large change management exercise. So we'll just do these again, progressive quarterly releases. The last one is around Websheets, as I've already spoken to you about before, is the Websheets and where they're at today, and the vision that we're building out as well is the ability to automate any tax compliance and reporting process anywhere in the world on this one platform. Now, we're very, very close to achieving that already. As I said, a number of corporates have been early adopters and service firms, for that matter, are early adopters and pushing this technology and using it in all sorts of different places. But there's further enhancements that we are going to continue to make around Websheets, and a lot of that's around improved levels of automation, usability, being able to reuse data sets across different related tax processes. So linking, for example, from a tax provision into a tax return, or from a tax provision out to a forecast of tax expense. We're also looking at implementing operational transfer pricing calculations to apportion or to effectively calculate based upon certain allocation factors in order to calculate those journal adjustments to be posted back in the ledger. So there's lots of things that we're doing in that area that'll help enable higher rates of automation. And the good thing is that Websheets is a generic platform that can then be applied for any tax process. So it's not specific to corporate income tax or indirect.
Or any compliance process for that matter.
Exactly right. So now into a bit more detail about what's coming this year.
Great, thanks Jim. So again, as Jim just noted, tax accounting continues to be a core focus for us in 2018. So some of the enhancements that are coming through really are core, and they do lead to what Jim was saying earlier about being able to automate those processes further and ensure that there's, it's a much more streamlined process. So one of those enhancements relates to the asset schedule. So at the moment, the asset schedule works. It's great in terms of, it works, but is it as intuitive as it could be? Does it lend itself well to automation? Not necessarily, and we acknowledge that. So we are at the moment going through and having a look at what can be done with respect to that. So the focus for us there is definitely in light of adjustments such as asset revaluations, R&D adjustments, any type of deferred only adjustments. So they're not always common, but certainly for say capital intensive businesses in particular, they're very quite common asset adjustments. So what we're doing is going through and actually having a look at how we can actually fast track those adjustments for users within the application. Another enhancement that we're looking at is an enhancement to the study schedule. So we're currently looking at ways to provide greater transparency within the study schedule itself and over particular adjustments in as well. And this relates to the asset schedule again. Providing on the study schedule a lot more transparency around what adjustments relate to. So currently with the study schedule, if I have a fixed asset class for motor vehicles, I just get one number coming through on my study, whereas we're actually looking at potentially splitting that out and making sure that the add back of additions for an asset class is added back for accounting, subtracted for tax. So a lot more transparency over the additions. The benefit there is that it will actually make it a lot easier from a review function, and obviously less time consuming as far as actually trying to reconcile asset numbers and getting comfort over the numbers. So it's a really positive development that we're looking for this year as well. We're also looking at potentially other changes to the body as well. So but the whole idea is that it provides greater transparency, not just for tax accounting clients, but for those clients using Integrator for, say, tax return preparation, where there are further enhancements that we'd like to do in the future to help the reconciliation between the study schedule and ultimately the tax return.
Yep.
Another enhancement for tax accounting was we're looking at splitting out the equity and the other columns. Certainly, again, I've spoken to a number of you in regards to the equity other column over time, and we are looking at splitting it out. We really do need to look at that in conjunction with the other changes that we're making to the study schedule and the asset schedule, because it is all kind of related, especially when it comes to the prior period adjustment or the unders and overs process. So those enhancements really do need to be looked at holistically. So we are looking at that, and that again, it's to provide greater usability within the application over equity adjustments in the application.
Yep.
Then there's further, I guess, general tax accounting and enhancements that we're looking at providing in the application in 2018. And again, this is to aid usability and help users fast track their calculations. So we're looking at introducing an edit check on their tax accounting summary. So currently, there's a journal that's essentially at the bottom of the schedule that gets posted back to the general ledger. What we're looking to do is obviously provide a sum that everything totals to zero. So again, you can quickly get comfort that your journal balances. In addition to that, we're looking at the ability to provide users with the ability to input the closing balance for tax-sensitive accounts on the balance sheet. Currently, users have to input the movement, which suits some users, it doesn't suit others. So we are looking at ways that we can provide that. Again, that's going to be in an intuitive manner for all. So that is, again, something we're focusing on. And another thing that definitely harks to the automation of tax accounting, we are looking at providing users with the ability to make tax depreciable adjustments via the web-based work papers on the profit and loss schedule. For those of you that have previously used, say, Tax Integrator, there is definitely that ability at the moment within the Tax Integrator application to make depreciable or tax-only adjustments via the P&L that get directly flowed through to the asset schedule. So that's certainly something that's on our radar this year, and we'll be having a look at that later on in the year.
Good. All right. So moving on to Websheets. There's a few things that are coming that I'll just step you through fairly quickly, but one of the key advancements of Websheets is the integration with tax accounting, or what we're calling the classic tax schedule. So you're familiar with the tax schedules and tax accounting module. Websheets is going to be integrated with that module by the end of the middle of this year. That integration will allow you to essentially load and pull in transactional data, or use the power of the Websheets work papers, and then feed that in behind the scenes directly into your P&L balance sheet, assets, losses, credit schedules, and then in turn flowing into the tax accounting. So that integration will mean that people can start to leverage the power of Websheets in the context of the existing use of the application for tax accounting. So it's pretty exciting, that change. Another change that we're introducing with Websheets is the ability to dynamically flow accounts from one Websheet to another. Now, it sounds like a lot of technology speak there, but essentially what we're saying is a lot of tax schedules or calculations are dynamic in nature, where you only flow certain numbers to another schedule under certain conditions. For example, if there's a tax adjustment. So this enhancement here enables you to basically build out dynamically build out different outputs or different work papers depending upon the certain attributes in the source Websheet. Another exciting change in Websheets is the ability for you to actually default values. So you can design a template with a series of Websheets to support a particular compliance deliverable or calculation. And you can also then set certain default values and have those values then locked down on the Websheet. So for anything which is static in nature that you don't want users to be tampering with, you can actually control that again through the template, rather than just leaving it for the user to have to enter it on the workbook. Some other things too, so we're looking at the audit trail behind Websheets to try and advance that as much as possible to provide the right level of audit trail to support the review and understand who has been modifying what and when, and obviously substantiating that with why wherever possible as well through notes and attachments. So just looking at that overall audit trail. And also just some other improvements around mapping. So improving the reversing of signage on mapping, and also then supporting double-sided journal entries around inputs into the system. So again, in the Integrator Classic, we've already got the account balance adjustment capability there to capture double-sided journal entries to opening and closing balances for both accounting and tax. So we'll be looking at building a similar but better module there to support those double-sided journal entries that perhaps are posted into tax or brought into the application perhaps after the close period has already closed off. We're also including some other enhancements around the formula builder, so the way in which we go about building formulas and defining formulas to make that more intuitive for users. And then, as we said before, just ongoing investments into making it a more streamlined and responsive application. Briony.
Great. So further enhancements that we're looking at that are less, I guess, functional in nature and more about usability, certainly, is cross-browser independence. So within 2018.1, we have done some background work. So we've enabled HTML5 compliance and the initial development work required for cross-browser. So whilst Integrator is not yet working on other browsers apart from IE, there is now a clear go-forward position for us to enable that. So At this stage, we're expecting to have cross-browser independence by the end of 2018. So with each progressive release, we will be making changes to the application. So by year end, we'll have that done. Other changes that we're looking at, which Jim touched on earlier, is simplifying and modernising and streamlining the user interface. So we are aware that a number of our users use Integrator very infrequently, and hence we need to ensure that the application is intuitive. So we're definitely rationalising the graphics and the styles within the application. We've rationalised the icons, making sure that they make more sense for clients and are consistent. So that's definitely something that we're doing. We're simplifying and making the menu more intuitive. So there's a lot of information or a lot of options on the left-hand menu that for the majority of users just really aren't important, and they really don't need to see them. So what we're going to be doing is providing users with the ability to be able to hide those functionalities they just don't need. Now, an exciting development for us in 2018 is the introduction of a corporate income tax returns for the UK. So we're looking at an end-to-end tax accounting and tax return preparation solution for the company income tax return for the UK, including the e-filing through to the HMRC. So this is very exciting for us. We do have a lot of multinational corporations today that use Integrator, but also other, obviously, entities that do want to be able to use Integrator for this purpose. Now, previously to date, we've had e-filing for Australian returns within the Integrator application, and now we're going to be branching out more globally now. Yeah.
So the method of implementation here is we'll actually be we're integrating Websheets. So we're using the power of the new Websheets platform as the data collection and calculation engine to feed UK compliance, and then we're tying that into the existing tax accounting. So the tax accounting that already all of you are using today, and then bridging directly into the HMRC for e-filing, leveraging a lot of our e-filing capability that we've already built into the application for our work here in Australia. So again, it's the one integrated platform, right? That's from all the way from tax accounting right through to tax return through e-filing in Australia and the UK. So it's a pretty exciting development. There's lots of clients who are already using Integrator who are going to be taking advantage of this, and perhaps looking at changing the way in which they've been currently delivering the UK corporate income tax compliance to get it onto this one platform. In terms of overall strategy, we are progressively working through other territories around the world, looking at the way in which we support multinational management of the tax function. And we're doing this in partnership with some of the service firms, but also in isolation, drawing from the broader Wolters Kluwer content business, learning all about the dates and rates and rules of these local countries' tax compliance, and actually building that into Integrator natively. So as a multinational tax function, you'll have the ability to use the one platform to truly support local compliance in many, many countries. So it's a pretty exciting advancement. As we said, the focus of this year is on the UK, but we are working on some other territories as well in the background. Another area that we're focusing on improving is around automation. As we said before, it's sort of an underlying theme for a lot of what we're doing at the moment. One of the enhancements we're incorporating that will be coming out in the end of Q2 is around the ability to automate a lot of the routine administrative processes, so creation of users, entities, and also security as well. We're going to be standing up what's called web services, and essentially what a web service is a process that can be called by another process. So if you've got, work with your technology teams, they can then connect Integrator into your internal systems. So for some of our larger corporations that are using Integrator, they'd like to integrate the tax system back into their internal employee directory system, so that when someone joins the organisation or leaves the organisation, it automatically updates the corresponding records in Integrator, saving someone from having to do that manually. So that's all coming. And equally, you'll be able to actually upload these users and entities from a spreadsheet as well. So if you don't want to go through the effort of plugging Integrator into your other corporate systems, you can just upload a spreadsheet to help streamline that administration process. The other thing we're doing too is incorporating robotic process automation into Integrator. So we are, again, looking at trying to automate some of those routine processes. We are working with one of the leading global robotic process automation technology companies to put in place an arrangement where we can actually provide this technology to you as a service. So we'll be able to provide you with the robots, which you can then effectively employ to automate those routine processes that you're currently undertaking manually. So we've got some immediate things we're going to be automating this year around those, again, those routine processes in Integrator. But what we're also doing is looking to find ways to work with you to automate other processes that operate in and around your tax compliance processes. That some of which, of course, are operating on Integrator, but some of them won't be. Also, the data transformation robot. You may have heard of Bob the Bot last year, which Bob was released to help automate the routine transformation of data sets that are then being fed into the tax processes. Our particular focus last year was around the Australian local file and trying to improve and codify the transformation of intercompany transactions so that you wouldn't have to spend so much time preparing the intercompany transaction disclosures each year. That was really successful last year. We've got over 100 users, and well over 100 users actually, using Bob. We've had some really, really good feedback. A lot of people in year one didn't really have time to invest all their energy into achieving the automation benefits. So what we've done is we've spent the last 6 months making a whole bunch of further advancements to the data transformation capability to allow it to automate a lot more of those data transformations, making it more relevant for different types of data sets, making it work for much larger data sets, and again, being able to sort of codify those routine data transformation tasks that you're doing manually based on memory. Now, in addition to all of that we've just spoken through for 2018, we've also got some innovation labs. So we've got, within Wolters Kluwer, we have labs operating in the US, in India, and here in Australia as well. And through these labs, we have a whole bunch of programs that have been undertaken to effectively go through and trial new technologies and explore new opportunities. But ultimately, whatever we discover in these innovations, we then try and find a way to actually incorporate within our product. So one at the moment that we're working on and very excited about is the integration of the Wolters Kluwer content into Integrator. So you're probably all aware that CCH's genesis was around the publishing of tax rates and rules and political alerts. A lot of that content, though, is delivered up through the IntelliConnect platform or AnswerConnect platforms, depending upon which country and what type of content you're after. But what we're doing at the moment is we're working very closely with our tax technical authors and content providers to find out what content we can incorporate into the Integrator compliance engine at the right point. So, the obvious things are, when you're looking at something like a 4880 deduction for black hole expenditure, integration of the relevant and up-to-date rules from the tax office as then converted by our CCH tax editors, presented there in context of the application. So we're looking at what we can present in the context of the actual application itself, and also finding out how we can incorporate an integrated search capability across both platforms. But by doing this, we're also then looking at incorporating some of the local dates, rates, and rules for other countries around the world into Integrator. So as I said before, we're on this progressive journey of building out local compliance globally, leveraging this content where possible. In addition to that, within Websheets, another exciting innovation is the ability to migrate your Excel models that you have high levels of confidence and trust in already, automatically to create Websheets. So rather than having to go through a sort of configuration exercise to design and then build your own corresponding calculations within Integrator's Websheets, you can just literally run it through a wizard and converter process to import that and convert it into a Websheet. Tax data analytics. So we are already working with one of these providers to build out an out-of-the-box capability for you to plug in Integrator into these local compliance tools, local visualization tools. Now, we're doing this in the context of the underlying tax accounting data in Integrator to allow you to then essentially build up your own dashboards to analyze the tax charge and drill into certain levels of information around both the current tax charge but also then historical tax charge. So allow you to run comparative reports over time, drill into what's actually driving tax expense as well, and just improve overall confidence from the numbers and support you in the process of you then reporting to other stakeholders of tax. So we've got this capability. We're working on it already in partnership with a couple of clients. A number of you have already implemented tax data analytics yourselves. What we're looking at doing, though, is providing this as standard, so that for those of you who don't have the time or investment to go out and build this stuff yourself, we can provide this to you more easily. Microsoft Office integration. So we're also working very closely in partnership with Microsoft to improve the interoperability or the transfer of data in and out of Excel and Word. Of course, once Integrator is great at being able to collect, calculate, and store all this data to support the tax function, but ultimately you want to then pull it back out of Integrator to then use in Word documents for disclosures or perhaps in other Excel spreadsheets to support further analysis. So we're leveraging some of the latest technology from Microsoft there to automatically pull this information from Integrator and then post it directly back into Integrator. So you get the power of Integrator as a controlled storage mechanism, but the power equally of Microsoft as an end user tool for working with that data. The last point about robotics as a service, I think I just discussed this one before, so I won't go through that one again. So that was all we had for you today. It was a fairly lengthy session. We covered a lot of detail there. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And as I said earlier on too, if there are any questions or if you want to dig into a bit more detail about any one of these, either current releases or future releases or roadmap or where we're heading, please reach out to either Briony or myself. And yeah, look forward to catching up with you at the next quarter for our next release. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to Briony and Jim for today's webinar. To all of our attendees, have a great day.